This is a very special occasion on many levels. I think I'm going to talk a little bit personally first. Some of you know that it's 40 years ago we started the first Living Education for Life school. And I had the opportunity to be the one that got handed the shovel. And when you're young, I was 26, barely 20, I was 25 at that time. And at that point in life, you don't see the longer patterns, and you're not even sure that this is what you want to do very long. But as things unfolded, I spent the next 12 years of my life developing the schools at the village. And then I hit a point where I'd done as much as I could with the schools because of my own personal inner unfoldment. And Divine Mother, through Swami at that point, arranged for me to have a little sabbatical. It lasted almost 10 years. The highlight of that sabbatical was coming up to Portland. So 1988, here I was in Portland, and had almost nothing to do with it, with children and education, except I had my own daughter at that point, and I got to raise her here. But through things like starting the community up here, starting a vegetarian restaurant, Song of the Rose, and all the different things that happened at that point, I had the inner growth to be able to start to feel that there was more to education for life than starting a grammar school, an elementary school. Another little sidelight, when I was up here, I was passionate that we were going to have a community in the country. And Divine Mother went along with us. We ended up, we had a nice little piece of property with a house and a few acres of land. Problem was that nobody else at Ananda shared that vision at that point, because it wasn't the time for it. And so when my time up here was done, property was immediately sold, and the money went into developing a city ashram. And so anyway, I went back to the village and got back into the schools, and I spent the last, I think it's 17 years now, developing the next phase of education for life down there, which was the high school, and then with Nakula and Nishala, the college. So this is the beginning of the 40th anniversary, and I thought, this is a pretty neat birthday present, because this it takes it to on the whole next level, because education for life isn't not only in 1984 I thought education for life was that little school at the Ananda Village. 2011, whatever it is, then you can think of, well, education for life is the Portland school, the Palo Alto school, the school starting in Pune, the high school, the college. You can think it was all that, but we're going to look back 20 years from now and think, wow, how quaint. And it's going to be this place that is the catalyst for taking, because education for life is more than schools. It is a way of sharing Sanatana Dharma in a Dwapara context. If you've noticed, kind of if you read between the lines, Ananda's always struggled with the idea that, are we a church? Everybody feels a little uncomfortable. We're not really a church. We have mandirs. We don't have churches, we have mandirs. And it makes us feel a little bit more comfortable. But what we're really representing is a new dispensation of truth on the planet that fits Dwapara Yuga. And we think in terms of churches and ministers and things like that, because that's the mental tools that we've been given from growing up at this point in history. But they don't. They all come from Kali Yuga. Because in Kali Yuga, the older age, we had to think compartmentalized. We had to decide, are we going to be a religious institution, or are we going to be an educational institution? And we're forced into those thought frames because that's what we've got. But those things we're leaving those behind. We're leaving those behind as a planet. And we're moving into a new age where we are going to have different concepts to think with. Education for life is fascinating when you study it. It talks about that there are four tools that you work with. Well, first of all, the goal. The goal, it says on the front of the cover, education for life, and Swami picked up this little byline. It says, What is it?
Preparing children to meet life challenges.
Thank you. I can never remember the exact words. But preparing to meet the challenges. Yeah. And I'm going to paraphrase it to preparing to meet the challenges. Well, what challenges? Well, the challenge of every single individual who's incarnated on this planet has a particular karma that they're coming in here to work with. And we don't know it ahead of time. Maybe we did on the astral plane, but when we come down here, we forgot. But it manifests to us as we go through life. It manifests physically, it manifests through relationships, through all kinds of different things. And whether we succeed in this incarnation or not is how well do we handle the challenges? How well do we handle our particular karma that's unfolding in front of us? Do we contract and do we get smaller, or do we expand and get bigger by going through it? That's the baseline of education for life. Do you expand or do you contract? And it's taking that and bringing that into this plane of trying to train everybody, not just children, but adults. And can we understand that? That's a whole lot more important than what church you go to, or even what meditation technique you use. It's just like all those are tools to help us expand and learn that we're down here to expand. Well, this campus gives us the opportunity to train hundreds and thousands of people to go out, not as ministers, but as transformative tools, for lack of a better word at this point, to go out and say, can you take teenagers and can you create a situation where they're going to learn how to use their life as an opportunity to grow? Can you take children? Can you take adults? Can you take parents? Can you take teachers? There's many different ways to approach this. And as we go through and developing this, we're going to have lots of different little vehicles besides schools that we're going to call Education for Life. We have a guest in the back of the room, Margaret. Wave, Margaret. Margaret's our little guinea pig because she came to the Education for Life training last June from Seattle, and she said, I don't think I'm ready to start a school. I just like to start an after-school program. And it was like, oh yeah, let's go. Let's just do that. Let's take these principles, apply them to an after-school program, so that children from a lot of different schools could come and get those basic Education for Life tools. Well, I do want to say just a little bit. Sorry, it's hard to talk about Education for Life without kind of talking about what it is. The tools, the basic tools are. You want to work with the body, and the goal of that is physical vitality. Everybody can learn, whether you've got Olympic type body like Matthew. Matthew's back there in the back. Matthew can run a 5-minute mile probably if he tried hard. But if you don't, if you've got a body if you're starting to feel the effects of arthritis or whatever that's coming in, it's the same lesson. Can you learn to relate to your body with vitality so that it becomes a tool for expansion rather than collapsing into thinking, oh, poor me, I've got this problem or this, what's missing? We saw a video in the high school this year of a young man who was born without arms and legs. He's now a motivational speaker going around the planet talking about how to make a success of your life with whatever you've got. The big thing that he shows when he does a public talk is he goes from a lying position to a sitting position. And that's the testament of what he's doing with his body. And that's a huge accomplishment for him, obviously. So how do you relate to the body? How do you relate to the physical part of what your incarnation brings? Feelings. We talk about emotional maturity. How do you, when life comes, again, do you emotionally contract through anger, jealousy, depression, or do you put out the energy to expand and use those life situations that come to you that are your karma coming to you, and do you learn how to say yes to them and say, I can do with this. I can reach out. I can forgive. I can express compassion, or all these different things. I can expand my consciousness through these things. Well, you can work with children, and you can work with teenagers, and you can work with adults to learn how to say yes to those things and to use them as building blocks rather than as stumbling stones. The will. The will is an incredible tool, hardly ever addressed directly in education or any ones I'm familiar with. Master has a whole sequence he takes you through, from physiological will to unthinking will to blind will to thinking will to dynamic will, which is the goal, dynamic will. I had a talk with one of our past students. I'm starting to collect stories. Davey shared one that that's one of my goals this year, is to collect stories for the 40th anniversary. So I was talking to one person, and they said, well, there was this interesting conversation I had with a friend of mine. He came up to me and he said, I want to be like you. And she said, what does that mean? He says, well, I used to think there were two kinds of people. He says, I used to think there were the kind of people who were kind of passive, who just kind of went through life and things just kind of happened to them. And he says, then I thought the other people who were what I was trying to be were the people who kept looking at life and waiting for the right opportunity to be able to act. And he says, you're different. And she says, you make your own opportunities. And I thought, that's it. That's the goal of education for life, to train people like this to sit there and say, we can do something. We can do something nobody's ever done before. And it doesn't make any difference if everybody thinks we're half stupid and crazy. But it's okay, because you go out and you create a new reality. You create something. And then the last one is the intellect. This is the last of the 4 EFL tools, the intellect. And to use the intellect in the proper context. I mean, you can have a sterling intellect. The smartest person I've met in this incarnation is Swami Kriyananda. I'm just amazed year after year at how he'll take something and just show me levels of it that I couldn't even fathom. So if you have an intellect like that, you want to commit it to truth. You want to commit it to, that's what Swami does. He takes marriage and he looks at marriage and he says, how do you find truth in marriage? He looks at education, how do you find truth in education? Anything, all these different aspects of life. But say you don't have that kind of intellect. Well, you want to use what you've got. You want to use what you've got to simply discriminate and be able to find the truth in your life, to try and find the truth that makes it, and it's not really that important. If you were like Davey was saying, if you got tracked in 3rd grade that you were in the Bluebird reading group instead of the Eagle group, it really doesn't make any difference at all because you don't find truth only through the intellect. You find truth when the intellect is tied to the feelings and the will and the body, all these different things together. So it's a whole other approach to finding that. Well, that's the basis of education for life. The body, the feeling, the will, and the intellect. I didn't mention spirit at all. I didn't mention religion. I didn't even mention God. Because really, none of those are that important to education for life. All you're trying to do is get people ready to make the best use of their karma that they can make in this lifetime. If they want to become Kriyabans, fabulous. But we do not measure the success of education for life for how many Kriyabans we get. We measure the success of education for life as how many people took the next step, how many people met the challenge and turned it into an opportunity that their life gives them. It's going to transform. It's going to transform not only education on this planet, it's going to transform how people think about God and religion. So we have a huge, huge opportunity, and we just barely understand the tiniest bit. As you might have picked up from that, I've gotten a little enthusiastic about this project. And, whoops, Bono, hold on. And I'll be moving here next summer.
Diva and Gangamata asked us to each speak for 3 minutes on education for life. What were they thinking? I thought you might like to hear from 2 students. We had a 3rd grade girl who started our school in preschool and had to leave, and her mom said, you should write a thank you note to one of your teachers. She said, I can't pick. I would have to write to all of them. I'll write to the school. And because at that time I was the principal, I inherited this. Dear Living Wisdom School, I loved being with you. I loved when we went on field trips and when we had fun with each other. Love, Elizabeth. And then more recently from an Education for Life online student in Calgary, Canada. She is a psychologist. And she says, I enjoyed the class from the beginning to the end. The class is the answer to my prayers. I studied many parenting books prior to this class and learned a lot from them, but only information. The parenting tools I've learned in your class are altogether different. They fit with my values, and the most important, they transpire respect to the children. I can give sorry. I could talk for a long time about the difference in Education for Life and other new, other systems of education, but what it really boils down to is the source, I think. I have to get personal too. In 1982, I took Nitai's class on Education for Life. That was before the book came out, and so it was called PTT, Parent Teacher Training. And in 1984, I actually moved to live at Ananda. And then the book Education for Life came out 15 years ago in 1986, so it's the 15th anniversary of the book, I believe. I mean, 25th, sorry.
She doesn't teach math.
Oh, yes, I do, but not in front of this many adults. It's the 25th anniversary. I just don't want anyone to know how old I am, Nitai. And at the book launch of Education for Life, and Nitai wasn't there. I don't know if he was in Portland or what, but he already knew it. It was for all of us who didn't. And I know that Usha and David and others who were there at that book launch remember that when Swami said, Education for Life will be much bigger than Ananda. And this startled me so because, like Nitai, I was thinking these schools were for the Ananda communities. That's why we were building these schools, for the Ananda communities. What? It was going to be bigger than that? So I dedicated the next 10 years teaching at the village, just trying to understand Education for Life and live it. I came up here to Portland to be a minister, and within 1 year, John and Helen, I blame you, was starting a school and just striving to take Education for Life out there, because Swami Kriyananda told me twice, once at the village and once after we started the school here, make it broad. Now he was telling Nitai, make the waterfall high. And he was telling me, make it broad. So we're working on these parallel tracks and these different aspects of Education for Life. And I was so thrilled when I went to an education conference in California and met a minister from the Church of Religious Science. And she started our first non-Ananda Education for Life school. But it was struggling. It wasn't doing very well because we didn't have enough teachers trained. And I was sharing this with Jyotish and Devi and whining is what I was doing. I'm good at that too sometimes. And I'll never forget, Jyotish looked at me and he said, it will be big. And you know how he can look at you with those piercing blue eyes and say something true, and he said, Babaji's in charge. And I went, oh, that's right. Babaji's in charge. Okay, I'll just keep doing my best. And it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but I'll just do my best in my little part. That's what I'm supposed to do. I know it. And then Divine Mother, through her willing agents, has brought us this venue. And finally we have the venue that outwardly, in physical form, people can see. Anyone can come here and see. There's something here. There's something big. There's something special that transforms lives. And like Devi put it so well, it's all about energy. It's all about opening everyone who comes here, whether they're taking permaculture or Education for Life teacher training, or if they're just here in a summer sharing nature camp, about their own energy, fulfilling their own highest potential. And thank you all for helping us bring Babaji and the Masters to this campus where I'm sure so many people will be touched. Thank you.